Welcome to Philosophy 15, folks. I am Robert Talese.
I'm Scott Aiken.
We are the authors of Why We Argue and How We Should, a guide to political disagreement. And our series here is just unscripted philosophical conversations. Now, we finished our last episode with the introduction, maybe even the coinage, of a new term by my pal Scott here, who ended us up with the idea of a weaponized meta-language.
Weaponized meta-language. So what exactly is that? So again, the thought is that a meta-language is a language about language, like grammar, or like the terms that we would have for rhymes, or like we have with logic. In the case of a weaponized meta-language, what we have is a meta-language that's, again, supposed to be evaluative. But what you've done is that you've just put the evaluative, you might say content-neutral evaluative terms to use for a certain kind of content. And so take, for example, the fact that whenever Kellyanne Conway was on Meet the Press, here at the end of January, it was one of the first cases where someone from the Trump administration has been interviewed for a long period of time after the inauguration. This is now an on record. This is a representative of a standing administration. She's interviewed on Meet the Press about the debate about how many people witnessed Trump's inauguration. Sean Spicer, the press secretary, had said that this was the most number of people that had witnessed an inauguration. Period. Period. One of the crucial things was that he had said witnessed, and that it wasn't about just mere attendance there in the National Mall. It was also about people watching on television and on screens and so on. So Conway then says, look, there are a lot of alternative facts. We wanted to bring these alternative facts to light. The problem, though, is that I think that this is a case where this is a failure to deploy a proper meta-language. And the opposition, the folks criticizing Donald Trump's administration, particularly because of the fact that it looks like they're not particularly good at being able to communicate their reasoning or what's accurate or true in some cases, it looks like these folks have lighted on this alternative facts and used it now against the Trump administration.
So weaponized in that way.
Weaponized that vocabulary in that way.
Let me take a step back and say,
yes.
So let's take a second order concept like spin.
Right.
So spin looks like it does have this content neutral evaluative force, right? Where properly deployed, it seems like you should be able to criticize the people on your side for deploying spin.
Right.
Okay. It has since come to mean in the vernacular, right? Spin is just what you call what your opponents say when you want to discredit. It's one of the things you call what your opponents say when you want to discredit what they're saying.
That's right. It's a kind of a debunking strategy.
Right. When you say that's just spin, it's just a quick and dirty way of saying you're saying all the stuff that I think is wrong. Right?
Right. Or
Rather
at the very least, maybe it's not assessment is wrong, it's maybe just more rationalized or something like that.
Yeah,
right.
maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
But it does look like it's lost the second orderness then.
That's right.
It's just like saying
right.
Yeah,
It's more like just saying false or right. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah.
Right.
In a way that's supposed to signal, I guess, maybe to the people on your side that
right. It still has the valence of no because it was supposed to have
yeah.
right. So the only way that it can be weaponized is that it still maintain.
Good.
So it can only be a weapon because it's supposed to have that content neutral. Right. This is you might say rationality that's supposed to be a kind of an impartial referee in our cases of reasoning, coming in and saying no. It's just that you're invoking it on your side. Right.
So then the thought is with the alternative facts stuff from Conway, that on a charitable interpretation of that statement. And let's forget
Right.
about what has gone on online and in social media.
Right, which just means lies. Right,
Yeah, yeah.
alternative, like one interpretation of it is just that alternative fact just
just
means a lie.
untruths.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
right.
right, an untruth. Right, a
Right.
convenient untruth.
Good,
Right.
good, or a favorite untruth.
Right.
A charitable interpretation of what Conway was trying to express, though,
Yes.
was that, and clumsily, let's be sure this is a blunder, right? That the point of the witnessing the inauguration period statement from Spicer was for the sake of bringing to the attention of the press and thus to the nation the existence of countervailing considerations
Right.
that should figure into the assessment of the number of people who watched Trump's inauguration.
Right.
And let me try here to be further
Yes.
charitable in further ways. Couldn't Conway have meant something like this? Look, we've seen the photos, we've seen the contrast between Barack Obama's second inauguration and Donald Trump's inauguration. We've seen all of the crowd estimates. But let's not forget the world even in the past 2 years, the world has become a lot more comfortably acclimated to social media outlets, to live feeds of things, and that the actual number of physical bodies on the mall that day might not be. And the difference between the Obama and the Trump inaugurations might in fact be no reliable indication of in the level of enthusiasm for Trump's presidency, the level of interest or the level of opposition to Trump as a president, as it had been portrayed, right? Remember,
Right.
the sparseness of the attendance in D.C. for Trump's inauguration was part of a story about the lack of enthusiasm, the strength of the opposition, and the general dislike of Trump.
The fact that he failed, that he didn't win the popular vote, all this
All
is
that
part of
stuff
a
figures
larger
in-
media
Yeah, yeah.
or story that the media is telling, and they want to push back on the support at the inauguration.
Good. And so maybe what Conway was trying to articulate was there are countervailing considerations that even if you take those photos at face value, that doesn't yet give you a clear barometer about any of the things that it's taken to indicate,
Right.
because of the even expanded in the last couple of years availability of different ways of witnessing a live event.
Right. That's right. So consider, for example, so what's important here is that we think about the reasoning that's behind the conclusion. Lots of people or more people or as many people witnessed the Trump inauguration as the one of the Obama inaugurations. Now, for the most part, we have to reason inductively to that. So, and no, inductive reasoning is notoriously able to be defeated, right? So, for example, if I see someone roughly 18 years old on a college campus, it's a pretty safe bet for me to think that that person is a student here. However, if that person is has got that, if I get closer and I see that the student is wearing a little sign on that person's shirt that says prospective student or something like that, my presumptive reasons have been defeated by a new fact that I've become aware of, and now I'm no longer justified in thinking that person is a student at this university. Why? Well, I had one fact, and then I had another fact that was a defeater for that previous reason.
Right.
And I think that that's what Kellyanne Conway is trying to do whenever she talks about alternative facts. She's talking about a new set of propositions that presumably are true, that it looked like complicate a set of inferences that we would be making. In some ways, a defeating or a kind of countervailing fact, as you had said, that it's a kind of complicating feature of the way that we make inductive inferences. And the point is supposed to say that, look, the inductive inference that we would make from the photo is complicated by the fact that there are a number of other things that need to be in consideration whenever we're making an inductive inference from the photograph. Now, the lamentable thing about the Kellyanne Conway issue is the fact that, despite the fact that meta language is still being used so much on the first, it looks like we use it all the time. We're familiar with the notion of rhyme. We're familiar with the notion of fallacy. But it looks like we're just terrible at deploying these, right? And it looks like we're only good at deploying them whenever they're in their weaponized form, right? It looks like we're not capable or good at deploying them whenever we sort of say, look, let's pause and do this from a principled, rational perspective. It looks like we're only good at deploying them whenever they're on our side.
Right, and so this is a case in which the term alternative facts has been weaponized against the person who introduced it.
By the opposition.
That's right. So, which is again a complicating feature of how this works, right? Sometimes, like with the word spin, that's a second order concept. That's a part of the meta language of our sort of political vernacular that I believe
wouldn't want to use on your own. Like, you wouldn't say, I'm going to give you some spin now. Right.
And
like that would be self-defeating.
Was weaponized by people deploying it who came up with the concept and deployed it as a weapon.
It's entirely outside looking.
That's right.
Right.
This was a case in which which Conway and Trump's opposition has taken up a concept and weaponized it. And by the way, again, we've been trying to be charitable in our interpretation of what Ms. Conway might have meant by this. Who knows? I mean, we're just speculating here. We're just trying to tell a Just So story that says, like, she's trying to give a separate an account of some defeating considerations that undercut the dominant media narrative, right? Fair enough. Whether that's true or not or whatever is a different kind of issue. But this is a case in which it's been taken up and now it's deployed in the same way that you say alternative facts now is just the same way of saying false. Right? To something that's asserted.
So it just sounds like again.
Right. That's right.
So notice, by the way, that there's something disappointing about this, not just because of a certain kind of communicative failure. It's the fact that in the humanities, we work really hard on being able to talk about not just the things that we talk about, but talk about how we talk about things. And we have a whole vocabulary and we have a whole set of skills that we try to impart to our students. And there's a great irony that here we have somebody who is trying to get one of these thoughts out, and she just has to reinvent the wheel, but it's all still in the sort of the first order language. She's talking about facts instead of reasons and things like that.
Or evidence.
Or evidence, right. It looks like those tools are readily available to be able to have one of these decent discussions. And for her point to have the kind of edge that it needed to have in that situation where she's talking with Chuck Todd. But because of the contempt that so many in the Trump administration have toward the humanities, they're rendered incapable of being able to make the point that they want to make.
That seems right, because you could say, again, what she meant to say when she uttered the words alternative facts was facts that point to a set of considerations that suggest an alternative set of conclusions.
That's right.
That's what I think she must have meant. But instead now it's the people who work for Trump, the people on Trump's side, and therefore, here's another error, therefore all the people who voted for him are incompetent, confused idiots. This is Philosophy 15, folks. Thank you.